Alright, time to play some Diablo. What? What do you mean login issues? No! Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, with Diablo 4 now out for a week for those with early access, the game has been absolutely thriving. People are loving it, myself included, to the point that it has actually become the fastest selling Blizzard game of all time. I'm behind that. Honestly, give them money, because that means that we get even more love and care put into this wonderful game. That said, there has been a ton of care put into it, even in the week of release itself. The team is working constantly. We've had multiple patches with bug fixes, multiple patches nerfing certain things that were considered exploits, and a full-on balance patch 2 days into the game's lifecycle too. That said, they just recently released another hotfix, and this was actually a bit of a bigger one too. No massive balance changes, so don't worry, your build didn't get nerfed, well, unless you used one specific build on one specific class, but we'll get into that a bit later. On top of that, some of the data miners looking into Diablo 4 found some juicy information that is absolutely worth talking about. Some of it will greatly affect the way that you look at every piece of equipment you pick up, and some of it will make you pick up some things that you may have just otherwise been leaving on the floor as you clear out enemies. Some of the Datamine stuff is also especially juicy just because of the implications that it could have on the entire future for Diablo 4. First up then, let's talk about the hotfix. They start with changes to bosses. The first one is increasing the level range for world bosses on World Tier 3 and World Tier 4. This is quite an important one. I didn't much run into this issue myself, but some people were reporting getting lumped into instances with a level 90 world boss at level 70 with other level 70 players too, and they just got totally crushed and couldn't even kill it for no reason in particular. The idea behind adding a larger level range for the world bosses is that they should create more balanced instances, allowing players to be grouped up with people near the level range that they are and go against a fair fight with a world boss that is closer to their level. I imagine this was also somewhat tied to the fact that lots of people are just hitting World Tier 3 and 4 at far earlier levels than they expected them to do so. Lots of level 60s are hitting World Tier 4 because they've got good builds, that type of deal. Next up is an increase to the damage dealt by the level 100 pinnacle boss, as well as reducing their total health. This is clearly in an effort to benefit more tanky builds rather than just damage spammers in that activity. After that, we have dungeon changes specifically, where they made adjustments to the spawn rates of elites in dungeons. Unfortunately, while it was sort of unspecific, obviously, this clearly means that they lowered the spawn rates, not increased, though many of us would prefer them to be increased. This is more than likely specifically aimed at specific farming routes that players have found, like Iron Hold as an example, that just have massive groups of elites clumped together. That said, Iron Hold still does have these big packs of elites, just now they spawn in groups of 6 or 7 rather than before, where you could get up to 10 elites in one spot, which was just crazy efficient for both experience and loot farming. As well, they fixed a bug with the teleportation mechanics in some dungeons that have the portals. They also patched something that players were exploiting. They had found a specific mob, fly hosts, which are created by the Trembling Masses enemy. They were just being spawned on repeat, so you could just sort of sit there farming this one enemy for ages, even put on a bunch of Thorns armor, and then you don't even have to actively stand there, it just dies when it tries to attack you, but now that's gone too. Past that, we have what they have labeled as a fix for Rogue, but they are undoubtedly honestly better worded as nerfs. Advanced Twisting Blades gave you cooldown reductions for every enemy affected, but apparently the way that it was working in-game was actually stronger than what the tooltip had implied. So they've changed the effect to actually match the tooltip. That's a little bit of a whoops. Then they also nerfed a specific rogue legendary aspect to the aspect of unstable imbuements. Apparently this was working in a weird way in the code, where it was benefiting more than intended from damage amplification, so they fixed it. Realistically, it brings it now back to how they intended it to work, but functionally, for the people who have been playing the game, this does count as a nerf to rogues in both the Twisting Blades and imbuement department, even if they only referred to it themselves as a fix.
But it still hurts. It hurts bad.
With that then, we had some reactions to the hotfix as well. Specifically, this Twitter user has noticed that they seem to have messed something up with the weekly cash rewards from world bosses after the hotfix, with them now dropping with level requirements far higher than the player who actually killed them, which wasn't at all how it functioned before, so I assume that this was just a mistake that they made within the hotfix that will hopefully be fixed sooner rather than later. As we prepare to move on, here's a tweet from the community manager for the game saying that yes, these patches and changes are happening super frequently. Yes, they're a bit unsettling, they're a little bit jarring, but that is just because it is the launch week. The further into the game that we get, the less frequent these will be, so don't worry about having to check if your class has or hasn't been messed with every single day for the rest of time. It's just sort of a touch and go for the meantime. Past that, we have some stuff worked out by data miners as well, which is actually really relevant. The first of which is item level breakpoints, which is really important to be aware of, especially as we are entering the stage of the game where a lot of people are caring more about their equipment. This handy little graphic was created by users user that Jumpy Jump S on Reddit, and it shows the various breakpoints and also includes some interesting information. Essentially, every item has its item power number that you can see when you hover over it, and every time that an item passes from one of these numbers to a further one, significant changes happen. An item power 340 item is notably stronger than an item power 339 item, and while there are of course power changes from 150 all the way up to 339, 340 is where the big jump happens here. That said, this is particularly important to consider for those who have entered World Tier 4 and started working around Ancestral Gear. Ancestral Gear starts dropping around item power 700, but the final major breakpoint is at 725. That means a piece of 725 gear is notably stronger than anything below it, and any further upgrades are much less noticeable in comparison unless it is a really big jump in item power. But there is a bit more meaning to this too. You can of course upgrade items in the game, and when you do so they literally gain item power. That's what it does. A piece of equipment can be upgraded 5 times for a maximum of 25 bonus item power. If you upgrade a piece of gear past one of these breakpoints, it does take effect as if it had just dropped at a higher item level, so it will get this massive power boost, but also it re-rolls all of your bonuses. Let's say you had the maximum possible damage reduction roll on an armor piece, you put it through the upgrade and go past the breakpoint. Now the minimum and maximum roll have actually changed, and you will re-roll your new stat between that rather than just carrying over a max roll to the updated values. In other words, these breakpoints are really important. They tell you at what point you really should be swapping out your gear, but also if you are upgrading your equipment, be careful when you hit these item power breakpoints. They could actually make something worse than it was before if you had a good roll then and you upgrade into a bad roll, so always check the preview window before pressing the button to commit to the upgrade. Then finally today we had some very interesting info from @Datamine on Twitter, who shows us symbols for the various skull gems that are in the game. This is generally known info to start with, right? Gems increase in power as you progress through the game. You find higher levels of gem, they have higher levels of the same stat and higher level requirements. You upgrade them into bigger ones, you upgrade those into bigger ones, you upgrade those into bigger ones, but the highest level of gem that you can currently get in the game is a royal gem, a royal skull, a royal ruby, that type of thing. And that is the picture in the very bottom left of this graphic. There are also 3 of them after it. These are in-game symbols that have been data mined out of it, meaning that in the game files already at this point, essentially the very beginning of the game's release, they know that they will release 3 higher levels of gems to upgrade to. And if they are already in the files, it means it likely isn't like a year away from happening either. It's probably relatively soon. That said, what does that actually mean? First of all, it means save your gems. Even if you are up to royal gems and you have all of your slots of gear filled out, you still want to collect these until you have a max stack of each of them in your stash. They cap out at 50 before it takes a second slot, so I'd just make sure that you have at least 50 of each one before you just completely ignore them forever and just walk past them, as you will be able to use these to upgrade when new gem levels are released in the future. Past this though is the implications here, right? Because for this to already be in the game files but not currently acquirable, there must be plans for them to be added in the near future. There are 2 real options that this gives us. The first one is seasons. The first season for Diablo 4 is going to be in mid to late July. No specific date has been set yet, and given this info, it's entirely possible that part of this season will be extra powerful versions of gems that can only be found doing the hardest content within that season. That is option number 1. Option number 2 is, well, a level cap increase. Up until this point, the point where you unlock all of these different gems, the higher grade of them, is when you reach certain levels. We know that there are a minimum of 2 expansions planned for Diablo 4. They've told us this, it was said by the devs themselves, but for obvious reasons we sort of assumed that they wouldn't be anytime soon. They would be quite a while away. These extra gems in the files, however, could imply that the first expansion for the game is quite a bit sooner than we expected. This expansion would likely increase our maximum level, and increased maximum level would explain the need for further gem upgrades. All that said, it's just speculation. The hard info here is just keep your gems even if your gear is all filled out. They will eventually have a use, just don't keep your tiny little ones once you have the big ones. It takes 3 of a gem to upgrade from one rank to the next, but it takes like 200 of them to upgrade to one of the gems that's 5 ranks higher. The maximum cap for each stack of gems in the stash is 50, so don't go overboard, just keep the big ones, but do get a nice big collection of the highest gems that are available to you. On top of this, sort of a side note, but we talked about it at the very beginning, this game, Diablo 4, has officially become the fastest selling Blizzard game that has ever launched. And honestly, what that probably means is that you should probably expect more than 2 expansions. I know they said 2 expansions minimum, but if the game is doing as well as it is, they will do more than 2 expansions, trust me. And that's it for today then, everyone. Just a bit of a roundup here all the info from the recent surprise hotfix, the changes it made both intentionally and also some unintentional stuff too, then a bit of a chat about both item power breakpoints and also the secret reveal that the game files already have 3 ranks of gem above our current max. Not even just 1 rank above, but a whopping 3, and what that could mean. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you continue to enjoy your time with Diablo 4, and hopefully the servers stay functional, because last night they were having a bit of issues, weren't they? Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.